We'll move on to our next example. I call this one Caught in the Act. Mike is a customer service rep for you, and he has some back pain that is ongoing. He's already submitted a medical certification under the FMLA. His certification says that he needs intermittent leave and that he would probably have 2 or 3 flare-ups a month that might last up to a few days. One day while Mike is out on this intermittent FMLA leave, his co-workers, who of course are having to work longer hours and some overtime to cover for Mike when he's out, come and complain to you. They say that Mike's actually at the lake with friends. They show you some pictures from Facebook that have him water skiing and driving a boat and appearing to have a great time out on the lake while he's supposed to be on FMLA leave. So what do we do in this situation? Fire Mike right away, right? He's abusing the FMLA by going off on vacation and having fun when he's supposed to be on leave. No, of course not. What we're going to do, we're not going to jump to any conclusions. We are going to investigate and find out what's going on before we take any action. The first thing we are probably going to do is go back and pull Mike's medical certification and see what it says. Again, it was going to be 2 or 3 flare-ups a month that could last up to a few days. So then we're going to look at Mike's history of leave, including this last leave that his coworkers say, is abusive, that he doesn't really need, and see if that pattern of leave fits in with what the medical certification says. So if Mike's already had 5 or 6 flare-ups this month, this is the 7th, and the other flare-ups have lasted, even if they've lasted up to a few days, which is what the medical certification said, then we're going to question Mike about it and whether this is really, FMLA-related leave, because he's already had 2 or 3 flare-ups this month, and more than that, in fact, and so this is his 7th flare-up, and that's not consistent with what his doctor said was his need for leave. Again, this is an example of how important that medical certification is, because it controls what leave the employee is entitled to, and we can hold the employee to that. So we want to make sure that we're sort of tracking what Mike's leave is and whether it matches up with the amount and the length and the type of leave that his healthcare provider has said he's going to need. So your next step after looking back at that certification and sort of the pattern of leave is to sit down with Mike and ask him about this most recent leave and see what he says. I tell clients this all the time, and a lot of times they're like, well, why should we just ask him? Because he's just going to say, sure, I needed the leave. But you might be surprised how many people will confess once you sit down and talk to them about it. And it's certainly worth sitting down with Mike and hearing his side of the story. He might tell you that those posts were posted while he was out on leave with his back hurting, but the pictures were actually taken the weekend before when he was off work, or even a month ago when his back wasn't bothering him and he was just sitting on the couch posting on Facebook while he was on the leave for his back pain. We don't know yet exactly when the activity occurred, when we can see when the posts occurred, but we don't know when the fun trip to the lake actually happened. So we're going to talk to Mike, and either way we're going to get information that helps him or information that hurts him, or maybe nothing, but we might as well talk to him and hear what he has to say. Then we'll investigate anything else that we need to, depending on what Mike says. If he says he was at the lake, months before, and that those posts were made while he was out with his back hurting, then we may try to do some further investigation to find out if that's correct. But what we'll finally do on this step is to just go back and look at our code of conduct and our policies, and if Mike has misrepresented or been dishonest about his leave, then again, we can take appropriate disciplinary action. I will say that this intermittent leave that Mike has been certified for is one of the most difficult type, really, of FMLA leave to manage, because it is is taking the leave in little chunks instead of all at one time in a 12-week period, and it effectively allows an employee to sort of turn his work schedule into part-time, or turn his work schedule into, well, I've got a flare-up, so I'm not coming in today. And as long as that medical certification states that intermittent leave is needed, then there's not a whole lot else that the employer can do other than to monitor it, as we've talked about in this example, and make sure that the leave that is taken fits within that description of intermittent leave that the healthcare provider has given. This is also another example where that personal certification policy that I mentioned in the last example might come in handy, where if Mike is required, and all employees who are taking any leave are required to sign a personal certification, or even just send an email with an e-signature that says, I took leave on these days for this reason, that we might have him then personally certifying that he was on leave for his chronic back pain, but if it turns out he really was at the lake with friends, we have him certifying one thing with his signature and doing something else, and that would be a violation of probably of our policies on honesty and no misrepresentations, and we could take appropriate action. There are a couple of other sort of court-approved methods of verification that we might use in this example as well, and they work very well with intermittent leave situations like Mike's. One is having a call-in policy, and again, these policies have to be in place for all types of leave, not just FMLA leave, but simply a call-in policy that requires an employee to call in and state that they're going to be out. It's not just getting your certification for being out for flare-ups 2 or 3 days a month and just not being able to just not show up. You can require employees still to call in and let you know, hey, I'm having a flare-up and I need to be out on these days. Requiring that call-in policy every single day an employee is going to be out can be helpful, because the employee, it just puts the obligation on the employee to check in and say every day I'm going to be out, that I'm going to be out for this FMLA qualifying reason. Another sort of court-approved verification that you can try is to have a policy of calling employees at home when they are out on leave to see if they're really at home. Now, in this day and age of cell phones and everything else, it may not be quite as effective to know for sure if an employee is at home resting. But I promise you, if you are calling to check on your employees when they are out to just determine, hey, I see you're not in today, is this for your FMLA qualifying reason? Again, it makes the employee have to say affirmatively, yes, I am out today for an FMLA qualifying condition. And again, you would have to follow that calling the employee at home or on the cell phone policy for all leave situations, not just folks who are out on FMLA leave. But it is one way, again, to sort of hold the employee's feet to the fire and to have them be able to have to verify what their reason for leave is on any given day, and not just assume that they can get away with taking off because they have an FMLA medical certification for intermittent leave.